Hey there, welcome to this episode of the Skift Meetings podcast, the podcast for curious professionals embracing the future of business events. My name is Miguel Neves, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Skift Meetings. And in this episode titled Delivering Exceptional Meeting Experiences, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mark Cooper, the CEO of IACC. In our conversation, we covered things like the core differences between a small event in a meeting venue and a large convention in a convention center. Why food is so important to the success of meetings. The sometimes unappreciated value of knowledgeable and experienced staff that take ownership of their role. How automation is a game changer for meeting venues. And why, despite an obvious desire for in-person events, the cliche of if you can do it on Zoom, it has no place in the room is not going away anytime soon. I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation, and if you like what you hear, make sure you check out our other episodes of the podcast on our website or subscribe through your favorite podcast service. Hello there, welcome to this episode of the Skift Meetings podcast. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Mark Cooper, the CEO of IACC. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Miguel. I'm delighted to join you today. Thank you for the invitation.
Mark, we've known each other for a few years. I'm going to say something like 10 years, like that. I've known, I think, mainly through MPI and IMEX and kind of participating in events. But I'd love you to introduce yourself and explain a little bit of your journey and how you ended up in your current role as CEO of IACC.
I'd be happy to. Well, my journey started earlier than most as I grew up in my grandparents' public house in a little rural pub in England as a child. So, I started waiting on tables when I think I was probably around 10 or 11. And my journey took me from that point onwards, right the way through the conference and meetings industry, the hotel industry. And I joined as a humble YTF youth training scheme in De Vere hotels in England at the age of 16, and I've had just the most incredible career from that point onwards through working within hotel groups in the UK, university conference centres, international conference venue groups like Dolce Hotels and Resorts in Europe, represented the third party sector. So I had the opportunity not only to be hosting meetings in our own venues, but hosting meetings around the world with organizations like Conference Direct. And then, through IACC, I had the privilege of leading 400 of the most innovative entrepreneurial venues and operators 12 years ago. Yes, it's been quite a journey with IACC alone, but what a career. Wouldn't change it for the world.
Sounds good. I remember as a child, as being a waiter was sort of my dream career, for fun. And I did have quite a few different bits. I did some silver service training, but I've never worked in hotel as a kind of a main job. But can definitely appreciate that. So your role is pretty unique. I mean, IACC is quite an interesting association. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But before we go there, just a fun question that I think always brings out some interesting things as well. How do you explain to your friends and family that aren't in the industry what your job is and what maybe your company does or your organization does?
Twofold. It's how I explain that to friends and family, but then also how I explain it to customs officers when I'm going through border control into other countries, normally attending a conference. So I say that I represent conference centers and I'm attending a conference on conference centers, and that always gets a quizzical look by return. So, you're having a conference about conferences. That's interesting. But how I explain it to friends and colleagues is really we are we're the association or the body that is there to support the collective good of the industry. So just like in the United Kingdom, you might have the National Farmers Union representing all farmers and the best interests of what they do. IACC, I think, and I hope, plays its part in recognising and representing those that really focus on conferences, meetings and training courses, specifically of less than 250 attendees. So the smaller part, but arguably one of the largest parts of the meetings industry worldwide.
Okay, well, let's dig into that a little bit further, if you will. So IACC It is just called IAC now, right? So that is the official name. You made that call, but it was the International Association of Conference Centers. Am I correct?
Yes, it was, Miguel. So IAC has been running, well, it was founded in 1981. So, throughout the industry and globally, the association is fondly known as IAC, the only word that rhymes with kayak, I've been told.
Get some
And
sponsorship there, eh?
there you go. And, you know, as the industry has evolved, the word conference center doesn't necessarily equal excellence today. Anyone can put the name conference center over their property, front door. And, arguably within certain parts of the world, the quality has been eroded by overuse of that word. And so, we now not only represent conference centers, but we represent executive training centers, hotels with a real focus on meetings and conferences, convention hotels. So conference centers singularly doesn't represent all of our membership. However, within our membership, we do have still a large number that are excellent, that do use the word conference centers. So we retained IAC for historical reasons. We just stopped referring to ourselves exclusively as conference centers now.
And tell me a little bit about the companies that you represent, the venues that you represent. There's a specific criteria. I know you've also changed that recently, right? But I wanted to understand the specific criteria around IAC membership.
Yeah, we have indeed. We've gone through one of our largest fundamental reviews, certainly in the 12 years that I've been in the role. Really at a very high level, we want to represent the top 1% of meetings and small conference focused venues in the world. And that footprint really is one where the average group size, or the real focus, is on group sizes of less than 250, quite often less than 100 attendees. The full service conference venue offer for an event, in its low hundreds versus an event in its high thousands, as you know, Miguel, is very, very different. And so we leave the larger events and that real focus around large event management to IACC, and we represent those smaller properties, training, conference and meeting venues, which take on a myriad of different forms. I mean, one of the ones that you may not appreciate exists today and has done for some time is the corporate conference center. Many of the world's largest organizations own and operate their own management and conference and training venues around the world. So Deloitte University in Dallas, Texas is one of the largest, and that has 800 guest rooms, operates at the top end of a 4-star standard, 70 to 80 meeting and conference rooms, and they're just adding 600 more guest rooms. So they will be at 1,400 guest rooms very soon. GE, the famous Jack Welch Crotonville Training Center, General Electric, Capgemini in Paris, just to name but a few. We have over 30 of those that are corporate owned and operated. Outside of that, the more obvious commercial venues around the world. In Europe, you have the very exclusive venues like Chateau Forme, which I say are like the sandals, but for the meetings industry, that all-inclusive approach to conferences and training. Hotels, resorts, urban conference and training centers, they've been one of our largest growing sectors. Organizations like ETC venues in the UK and others, to name but a few. And then academic conference venues is a large part and a very successful and high quality focused management training and conference facilities. So we're very lucky. We have many categories, and our standards of brilliance review that we've had more recently has widened our footprint a little. So we were starting to see that there was some really good quality, full service, what are often referred to as convention hotels. So not convention centers, not exhibition centers, but convention hotels like Postilion hotels in the Netherlands that were offering really incredible services. So we are welcoming them into our membership as well from this summer.
Yeah. So a few clarifying questions. You mentioned these larger corporate centers. That the one you mentioned, 1,400 rooms soon, something like that. But they still qualify because their focus is the smaller meetings. Is that what I'm hearing correct? So there would still be members, or would they sort of then start creeping outside of your scope?
No, they're still absolutely focused on conference and training, particularly training and management training. So they exist for the development of their staff worldwide, so they absolutely fit our footprint. The meeting rooms are designed for meetings. The technology is built in. The acoustics, the lighting is all at a quality level that ensures that they offer the very best adult learning environment. So they meet our criteria often easily, because those organizations are investing at a very high level to provide the comfort and quality. The one in Deloitte University in Dallas, as an example, it consumes more Starbucks coffee than DFW Airport, and they're second only to that property, because everything is provided and inclusive for the attendees, because it's a closed facility for their employees only. But we have many other different variations. TD Bank, Sun Life of Canada, Verizon have an incredible hub in Boston, New York, which is just the most fantastic facilities and excellent technology. And we're taking our annual conference next year in the Americas to Basking Ridge in New Jersey, to the Verizon conference and training facility there. And I hear the technology will blow your mind. I'm sure you'd like to join us, Miguel, because I know technology is a big part of your background and interest.
Absolutely. And I know you're going to be in Copenhagen or near Copenhagen in October as well for your European event, right? So that will be.
We are. Yeah, our Knowledge Festival is a highlight event, and nowhere better than Scandinavia, and certainly from a culinary trends and quality perspective, of course, Copenhagen is a real attraction for our industry leaders.
For sure. So I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper on so you mentioned quality, and I think it's interesting that you're positioning very much saying, hey, you have convention centers, some of them do great jobs, but catering and kind of managing events for thousands and thousands of people is a very different thing, is a very different proposition to doing small groups where you can really guarantee high quality food. Everybody's got a great seat, everybody can see everything, all those kind of things. I assume that's sort of part of but I wanted to dive in a little bit into the criteria. You mentioned criteria, the brilliance that you mentioned. How do you measure this? Like, could you give us just a broad overview of the sort of type of things that you're looking at and how you actually measure those? Do you personally go to the venues? Do they have to submit? How does that work?
So yes, as part of the application process, if we have a property that feels like they have a place within our community, and importantly feels like they want to be a part of our community from a perspective, from the aspect of thought leadership, creativity and ideas exchange, so that's why you would join IACC, first of all, not for lead generation like a marketing consortium. So if you meet that stage and that within the process, then the next point is, do the facilities represent, what we would expect to be in the top 1% in the world? Now, to do that, it runs across all aspects of what the venue offers. So yes, from the physical characteristics of the venue, as you would expect, the meeting room, the acoustics, the lighting, through to the technology, food and beverage offer. Do they offer, packaging, both rigid and flexible packaging, to be able to have that all-inclusive approach to buying the services at a per person attendee level. But it doesn't just stop there. The sustainability credentials, the corporate social responsibility credentials as well, are very important and have become a bigger part of our evaluation of the credentials of venues in this latest review. Do they create an environment that is, that's conducive with stimulating the mind, making individuals feel invested in? And that's not to say that larger venues, Miguel, can't offer that. They can, but quite often it is the case that the larger the event, the plainer the box that you then have to build everything within it. Whereas when you're operating an event of less than 250 people, and often in that 100s and low 100s and less, then you should be able to actually put yourself in an inspiring venue an environment that you don't have to create from scratch. You really don't have to go to a boring ballroom in a hotel in an urban environment, that needs that venue to be, to serve multiple functions throughout the year. And build something from scratch. A, that's not very sustainable. B, it's very expensive and creates another job or layers of jobs for the meeting professional, where actually there's some incredibly inspiring venues where that is already built. It's already in place. The group that used the room the day before and the group that will use the room after you've used it will get those facilities and the use of that technology already built in. And we think it's far more efficient. We think it's better value for money, and we do think it is, it is a stronger proposition for the planet as well. So standards of brilliance has to stand up against all of those different pillars and be continually reworked. Now, you asked me the question of how you evaluate. Well, every new venue that puts forward an application is appraised by the board, and there's a site inspection by a board member or representative of IACC to make sure that that facility meets those standards. And we do turn a lot of facilities away. There are something like 60 tenants that they have to meet through the application process, and that does allow us to shortlist very quickly those that do not meet the IACC standard.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there about the black box kind of approach, or kind of bringing a lot of people in, is a real differentiator here, right? Because I assume a lot of these venues are also quite inspiring, or are in beautiful settings, etc. Some are urban, I understand, but still, this idea of you bringing a meeting into a place that is inspiring in itself, and into a building that is inspiring and has everything ready for you to go, I think is a very different proposition from you going somewhere and putting on the production and creating the scenario and doing all those kinds of things.
Yeah, it is. It allows you to focus exclusively on the content, on the developing of the social elements of the program, which of course are bigger and more important to get right today. So it does allow you to be efficient as a meeting professional, whilst all those other benefits are in place as well, in my view.
So I also know that copper skillet competition is a big part of IACC. Could you kind of explain what that is and how it works? Because I'm always seeing these copper skillet kind of press releases and photos, and they look amazing. And I'm not always sure how they kind of connect together with IACC.
Yeah, it's like the Open in tennis. So it's a global tournament. All of our countries have cook-off competitions. All those countries with density in terms of our membership, they have their own cook-off competitions for their chefs. Really, it was born out of the fact that some 15 years ago, chefs never used to come out of the kitchen. They were an invisible entity. And copper skillet was invented to actually try to demonstrate the artistry and the quality of food and beverage within the meetings industry. Back then as well, it would get a hard rap in terms of, quality. Sometimes it was viewed as being sort of clinical and institutional, where really within the IACC venues, arguably it was the polar opposite. And so it was designed to bring chefs out to celebrate the quality and the passion that they put into food. And the competition is a huge draw and has only become bigger and bigger as a result of everybody's increased interest in relation to food quality. So those chefs compete in front of their audience, in front of their peers, in front of meeting planners, in front of media, to find a junior and senior champion that will then go on from a country-based competition to compete in the chapter competition, which is either the Americas chapter, Europe, or Australia, Asia Pacific. And then we have the global final, which just took place at our annual conference in Durham, North Carolina in April, which has the winners of each of those chapters competing. And it's a fantastic event. But I think other than the spectacle of it and elevating the quality and promoting the quality, it's also a really important development element for the chefs themselves. They get to compete in different parts of the world against chefs with different culinary backgrounds, and so it's really important for us to retain talent, and by providing a quality competition like that, hopefully And we hear it is the case that chefs, value that from their employer investing in them, competing in the competition. So, yeah, I hope. It sounds like you need to come and see a live one. So the invitation is there. Come to Warwick conferences in the UK, Miguel, 19th of July, and you'll be able to see one of those cook-offs taking place.
I think, food is obviously it's a big part of my life, and I think it's a big part of lots of event professionals and meeting professionals' life. But I think you raise a really interesting point, because I'm really not aware of any other association that is that connected with the catering side. And I'm talking about meetings industry associations. So you're really connecting the dots and also exemplifying the much closer connection at conference centers and then the other types of venues that are your members to the food and the quality of the food than you would at other types of events and other types of kind of sizes of events and sizes of venues and the different kind of things. So I think it's really interesting that plays such a big part in what you do, and I guess in bringing your members together.
Food is either the glue that knits an event together, or it's the bomb that explodes it. And it provides, and when it goes wrong, it provides all of the distractions with the attendees that mean that they only ever talk about it. So it is an incredibly important element of the overall meetings experience to get right. And because it is one that, of course, touches more senses within the human body than anything else, it has the ability to create the memories better than anything else as well. So that's why we place it at the heart of a lot of what we do, and feel it's a really important element of the overall meetings experience.
I wanted to go back to a little bit of, the things that are important to IACC and the things that you assess with your members. And if you will allow me to sort of paraphrase the Jim Collins book, From Good to Great, or the title of the book, I'm thinking about, what makes an event go from good to great. And I'm assuming, you'd want to put the great ones at one of your venues. But what is it that makes those events great? You mentioned the food already, but are there other elements that you think are really crucial for events to kind of knock it out of the park, if you will?
So apart from all of the elements needing to be absolutely at the top of their game, the one silent element, which is the difference to me, is knowledge and longevity of the staff. So that's really, really how the team carry the knowledge to create a seamless, incredibly well delivered event. Particularly at the moment, as well, as the industry recovers and some of that knowledge has dissipated and gone away, then when you don't have highly knowledgeable staff on site that can deal with it, when you, for instance, don't have a IT and AV solution, you only have an AV solution, then that's what makes a difference. The longevity I mentioned as well is in relation to staff. I've always been a believer, through working within the industry for as long as I have, is that the companies and the venues that have the staff with the longest stable tenure, and they're not turning staff over all the time, the outcome of that is that they take greater ownership. So they take it personally. They take it personally when they get it right. They take it personally when it goes wrong. And so that ownership, I think, and that knowledge collectively is really critical element, and the hardest element if you're a meeting professional to evaluate. Who asks in their RFP what your annual average turnover of staff is, or your average tenure of your staff? You just don't do it. But you certainly know when you're in safe hands and you're at a venue and you feel like that group of staff get it and are working harmoniously together.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I made a few notes there already, so thank you for that. So wanted to jump into research. I know that you do a lot of different types of research. The meeting room of the future is one that really springs up. And then you also have, I guess, live labs. I don't know if that's a correct definition, but you kind of have representations of your research, and you also present your research, but you also have kind of live activities around the research at events like MPI, WEC, and other events. Take us through a little bit of what you're doing there in terms of research, and then also the live embodiment of the research.
I'd be pleased to. And, it's one of our backbone initiatives for the association that's now in its 7th year of IACC Meeting in the Future. It was born simply out of the fact, Miguel, that all of the research that was available in the industry tended to point towards or really focus on big metrics and larger events. It would, and very credible in its own right, but certainly didn't feel like it had that focus on events of less than 200 attendees in terms of trends, where the industry is going, where the innovation is. So Meeting Room in the Future was born out of a frustration that, that there was no real focus on smaller conferences, meetings and events. IACC felt that, and we did feel like we were well connected through our partnerships with both the most entrepreneurial venue operators over 4 continents, which is our membership, of course, but also the best suppliers within the conference venue group, and then also those ambassadors, the sort of gurus that were experts in certain areas, and of course through our partnerships as well with organizations like MPI, CVent, Events Industry Council, etc. So we felt we were in a position to do something by drawing on that collective knowledge, and Meeting Room in the Future was born out of that. It's continued pace. One year we will ask meeting professionals what they're looking for or expect venues to deliver in the next 3 years. And then the following year, we ask venue operators the same set of questions. Of course, we're looking for common trends, but we're also looking to pull out where there's differences of opinion, because we can educate one or both parties in that regard. We carried on through the pandemic. We actually switched gears last year, and we delivered 4 reports instead of 1. And the main reason being is the industry was recovering and changing so quickly that, by the time you'd written the report, we'd change gear again and we'd work stuff out, and we realized where we were going back to. So that is the background. That's what we do. That's what we invest in as an organization. And of course, the value of that is not only to those venue operators that want to be designing and redesigning their own facilities for 3 to 5 years in the future, but also for the industry to be able to, wider industry, to pick it up. And that's why we take it into environments like IMEX and MPI, WEC, is we just get greater value. As long as we get the opportunity to deliver it in our way, and that's worth pointing out. So having just returned this weekend from WEC in Mexico, we actually built out one of the meeting rooms in the convention arena and designed it specifically around the concept of the future of meetings. So it was a big investment to do it, not only in the physical elements of the room, the technology as supported by Encore, who were brilliant to create us a round meeting room with technology that was visual and sound that was easy to pick up right the way around the room, but also in terms of the content as well. So we brought in Eric de Groot from Mind Meetings in the Netherlands, and he facilitated at least 6 of the sessions that we ran, some of them around the report and the findings, but others really around the concepts of things like inclusive menu planning, foods of the future, technologies, and where they're developing in a way that is not a typical trade show linked or larger conference linked presentation in a dull room with no natural daylight. We did have natural daylight as well, and the sun was shining. So we enjoyed putting that together. It's a big investment, but we also feel it's important that that's what IACC represents.
I like it. And Eric's been on the podcast, so I imagine if he was facilitating, there was a lot of interesting discussions and also quite open-ended questions were asked.
100%. That's all that happened. But feedback, we were turning people away at nearly every session for the 2 days. We ran 8 sessions, and we had to control the numbers so that it was a meaningful group size where it became facilitated learning as opposed to presentation. Mm-hmm. And I'm not not saying that it's something we enjoy doing, turning people away, but it certainly demonstrated that the intent was there, the appetite, and people just arrived earlier for the next session to get in.
It's a problem, but a good problem to have.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that you had to build this out, right? Where you were talking about your venues or places where you don't have to build things out, but in this case, you had to build it out because MPIWC was in a box kind of convention center, so you had to create that scenario, as you wanted to.
We would do as we would have to at IMEX or IBTM or one of the other events, just because of the facilities that need to exist.
Absolutely. So let's pick on trends a little bit. You've just released the future, meeting room of the future, the latest one. Any trends that really stand out for you that you think are important for meeting planners, essentially our audience?
There were several that stood out, honestly, this year, Miguel, maybe because this was the first time we'd gone back to meeting planners in this way since 2019. So, the last normal year. And a number of things stood out to us. So, first of all, that saying, if you can do it on Zoom, it has no place in the room, is one that I think is a really powerful one. And that's linked to the fact that to invest our time and money in traveling and attending live events, it must be something in an environment that we deliver that is unique. Now, it's an overcoined expression, I know, creating exceptional meeting experiences. However, it's just the fact that is not going away, and it's being accelerated even more. If we want to use a different phrase, because that's what we do after a while of using the same one, but it's still being relevant, then what we're doing is we have to create memories for attendees, positive memories for attendees. And that's something that, helps draw out the value of attending the event even further, the respect for a brand, the retained knowledge. So, that's where we say, the more things, change, the more they stay the same. So we've got to keep creating new experiences and memories, and the venue has to play its part in doing that. Otherwise, it's a big, hard job to do it. Outside of that, some interesting ones, I thought. One was that traditional team building, team development was out. People were not interested in it. It was scoring very lowly. However, that's not to be confused with creating team dynamics through socializing. So the socializing part is really important, and that's building relationships to build effective teams. But people just don't want to do it in the old traditional ways of being in an outdoor area, being given a problem and a task to solve, and and the old school way of doing it. Other ones, we've come out of this pandemic definitely appreciating more open spaces within venues. How many meeting professionals are evaluating the social spaces outside of the main meeting room as much as they're scrutinizing the meeting room itself? Not many. We're still focused very much on, what's the size of the plenary room? How's that going to work? What technology's in it, as opposed to the spaces outdoors? And in the same sort of, or in a similar vein, groups and meeting professionals are looking for more privacy than they had before from other groups. So they are recognizing and appreciating exclusivity a lot more, or even exclusivity around break stations, lunch stations. So the industry needs to acknowledge that and be able to provide solutions for organizations there. More contentious ones, let's draw analogies. Of course, we're looking across geographical and different generations. When we look at the importance of sustainability for Europeans versus Americans, then it's scoring much lower in America in terms of significance or importance over the next 3 years than it is in Europe. So that's something that we need to be aware of. Mm-hmm. And the industry needs to, I guess, acknowledge. If something is waning because something else is more important rather than something, being less important, then we've got to try harder if we're going to continue to make the strides around creating events and making sure our industry is not, not considered in the same vein as the tobacco industries in the 1980s. So that's really important.
That would be good. So a little bit of a overarching trend that I'm seeing, and I don't know if you agree with me, but picking up on what you were saying about the social element of events, I feel like this might sound strange, but I feel like events are returning to 2007. And what I mean by that is that before the financial crisis, I think events were much more open about the hospitality side, the social element, the kind of enjoying the event as a human being. And then I think we got very serious. We kind of went, no, we have to prove that we're a serious industry, and we have to make sure we have ROI, and we have to measure how much we're worth, etc. And then came the pandemic, and of course everything shut down, and now we're recovering. And I think the latest trends that I'm seeing is, oh yes, the younger demographics want to enjoy themselves. They want an excuse to bring their partners. And I feel like events are really embracing this. So do you see the same trend happening? What do you think about that?
100%. And sometimes our industry, the longer you've been in it, the more circular it becomes, or secular in terms of, some of the things coming back and going away and then coming back again. I think undoubtedly the requirement to measure in quite the same way as you did before, it goes away, when there is just a common belief or common understanding that that's something that's really important for us. I do, think as others do, that the one thing that the last 3 years has done, and the reason why it's fueling this positively, is it's taken away any real question that was on the table that, online can replace live events. If anything, it's really highlighted the areas where you can deliver something online, but only to a point where you then must have the human interaction, whether that be on a regional basis, national basis, or on a global basis. So it has, it has accelerated. It has taken away some of the, the more considered ways of measuring that. I do think it's important to measure memories, though, and look at events in terms of, well, everything that we do within a meeting or a conference, what is this? What is the sense that we are stimulating there for an attendee? And if anything is not stimulating 2 or more senses, then potentially, you're under delivering on what are very high standards these days. But also back to 2007, when I think about it, then we were still talking very much then about the power of networking rather than the power of human interaction and socializing. So I think actually we've come we've gone more in the direction than, or gone further in that direction than we did even in 2007, when there was still, or that period when there was still, it needed to be a considered business, a set of ROIs.
Absolutely. Do you think there's any danger that economic uncertainty, any sort of recession would trigger the same kind of feelings of, meetings being seen as just big parties and a sort of backlash against them, like we saw with the financial crisis?
Yes, I think we should always be mindful of the fact that the environment, organizational environments, as they shift, one of the taps that is the quickest to turn off are live events, meetings, training, and development. Particularly at times of fiscal distress for organizations or economies on a global basis. So I think we should always be very mindful of that. And the only thing you can do to protect yourself from that is be exceptional as a venue, so that you are turning away a lot more business than wants to come and run its event with you. So when that demand drops, you are still successful. And you have the relationships in place, which means that the loyalty exists. And that's not always the case if you're not a great venue. People will flip from one venue to the next and search in those times the cheaper option or the better option. And also be more financially prepared for downturns in the future. I think that's the one thing that we've learned Our war chests have to be there to protect us during those difficult times, so we can protect the staff and the knowledge that we've got, and that's a really important thing, as opposed to protecting our profitability, is protecting our talent.
Yeah, we saw from the restart, or the challenges with restarting at a lot of destinations, venues, etc., that's very, very important. Like you said, that legacy and that experience is hard to replace.
Undoubtedly.
While we're talking about challenges, are there any other challenges that you're thinking are coming up ahead that you'd like to highlight, that you think venues, but also meeting professionals from all sorts of aspects should be aware of?
I think one of the areas, and it links back, Miguel, to what we've been talking about in terms of the value of talent and our people within our organization. So yes, we've got to create stable environments for them where their work-life balance is healthy. They want to work for you as an organization. They feel they have a voice. So all of that being said, one of the ways I think we do it is that we shouldn't run away from innovation and automation, thinking that everything that we must do has to be in person, and we're a hospitality organization, so that's what we do. It needs a person at the end of the telephone, particularly in the sales process side. I think there does need to be better automation. There does need to be improved efficiencies there, and protect the hospitality element where it's really needed, on property and in the attendee interaction piece there. So I hope that through technology, automation, and efficiencies, we can personalize experiences. We can manage dietary requirements, as one example, even better than we have today. We can, I hope as well that, we embrace, for instance, this move towards, healthier foods, health and well-being, by being brave. And sometimes that's about redesigning menus, making something that was an exception the norm, and making the one element that isn't so healthy, the exception. So being brave in that regard, I think will serve us well into the future as we continue to evolve.
You mentioned automation a little bit there. And could you give us a few examples of where you think that's kind of, the opportunities around automation that you think are interesting? And I guess in some ways, is this an RFP automation? Is that the main focus in terms of making that process more streamlined and just kind of making that work better? Or are there other areas of automation that you think are sort of part of your vision for the future of events?
Well, RFP management is certainly one of the areas that's been historically a pain point, even before 3 years ago. But linked to that, I think the whole evaluation piece for venues, the booking piece, the sourcing, the live booking, the RFP management, in honesty, the better and more simplified route to finding a good match and the availability and a point to be able to book that efficiently is all interconnected. And we should be able to do that better than we do today without relying on, third-party organizations to do that for us. So I think that's one area that I hope that we see better efficiencies and, and a more enjoyable pathway for those wanting to find the best venue for their meeting. The other, again, is embracing, just even the evaluation process as it relates to a venue. Interestingly, in the research, we're always interested to say, at what point does the event size trigger an in-person site inspection versus an online inspection, for instance, and seeing, having a walkthrough of the property, or using, something like all-seated sort of virtual appraisal of a venue. And there's still a strong appetite within the meeting planner community to have in-person site inspections at a venue, even for smaller numbers. But maybe as well, the stages of evaluating a process, some of those can be online. And then once you've shortlisted, then your inspection process, once you actually think you've found the venue that's going to be a great match, is when you set foot on the property, as opposed to going and viewing 5 or 6 venues, which used to happen, and is again not very efficient and not very sustainable.
For sure. Do you see AI playing a role in all this? I mean, we just actually covered Planned, I think, is one of the first companies that I've seen that use AI as part of a venue sourcing service. Are you seeing more of that? And do you think that's going to be part of this automation that you mentioned?
So first of all, I don't think there's any evidence out there yet that suggests, or rather goes beyond suggesting that it will play a part in the future and is actually something that is concrete. I just think we're a little bit too early for that. I think it's easy to draw an opinion on something that's not established and have an opinion on it. So I'm going to try not to do that in my answer to you. But I will say that it came up at a low level. I think 4% felt that within the next 3 years, meeting professionals, 275 meeting professionals, 4% felt that AI will play a role in the future. And certainly one of our debates around the Delegate 2028 talked about how AI could potentially be used from a perspective of influencing, for instance, what takes place at an event versus what takes place after an event. So the example that I know was given by Laurie Markham-Pugh, who represented that side of things on the panel discussion. She really felt that that actually we'll move away from attendees taking knowledge from an event and then applying it into the workplace after the event, to having the knowledge and creating the solution at the same time of the event for their organization, and actually their job is done by the time they've left the event, as opposed to needing to just take the idea into their organization. So I find that interesting, that the event might have more solution and problem solving to it, and AI could be a part of that. But like I say, not that I'm cynical, I just feel it's too embryonic, in its stage of evolution for us to decide how it has a role within live meetings.
Interesting. I think that's an interesting example, and anything that shortcuts the journey from inspiration to actually making part of your day-to-day work, I think is worth keeping an eye on and worth it.
Oh yeah, undoubtedly. I'm fascinated by anything that affects the enriching of the content, but also the creating of the solution whilst we've got people together, the power of people.
Absolutely. Mark, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. I've enjoyed it tremendously. I want to start wrapping up, and I wanted to get someone that you suggest, or your suggestion for someone who should be on the podcast to join us at a future episode.
Oh, and there's so many great individuals with fantastic perspectives that I have the pleasure of spending time with. So it's difficult for me. But we talked a little bit about automation, and that raises as many eyebrows as it does. It piques interest, and someone that I had a great conversation with at IMEX a couple of years ago was Kim Napolitano at Hilton Corporate Worldwide, and Kim shared a view with myself that actually it should and can have a place in terms of enriching and allowing us to deliver more hospitality in a personable level because of automation that takes place in the background. So I'd encourage you to chat with Kim. She had different perspectives, and of course she's responsible for a portfolio that is a major player in the industry.
I'd love that. That'd be great. We're glad to get an introduction. I think we can continue that automation conversation, which I think would be of interest to our listeners. So Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. To everybody listening, hope you enjoyed that episode. Please don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast, and looking forward to connecting with you, Mark, again soon, and hopefully with our readers and our listeners wherever we meet again.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Miguel.